My name is Lisa Smith, and I ride the Atheist Underground. My mother taught me how to read when I was only 4 by reading the Bible. So by the time before I was in kindergarten, I was reading certain sects of the Bible. At the same time, I was still trying to pick apart some things, like the 10 Commandments. And one of them is, honor thy father and mother. Well, what if your parents tell you to steal? Then what? And I remember that because it took place in a grocery store. My mother said, this religious woman, she said, put this down your coat. I didn't want to. There was a big turning moment. We first got online got our computer in 96. And it's at that point that I started doing a lot of reading and finding out about other religions. It just blew me away, the symmetries in all the different religions, and which I was in my 30s and I didn't know any of this, and I felt stupid. And so I started reading as much as I could on, Mithraism. That was a big one. Dagonism, another one. And thought, these really sound familiar. And then out of the blue, and I had read the Bible cover to cover 4 times by this, off and on, and then of course your daily devotions. So I had read the Bible probably cover to cover, maybe a total of 6 times. I don't know. All of a sudden, I opened up the Bible and started laughing out loud. I literally laughed out loud, going, oh my gosh, this reads just like Greek mythology. This is all a sham. So it took about, I'm going to guess 6 to 7 years, where I went from being a born-again Christian to just a Christian to spiritual. And then I guess I went to anti-theist, and then I went to agnostic, and then I became a militant atheist, which is worse than a militant Christian, if you ask me sometimes, because I've been both of them. And then atheist. My goal, I guess, so I don't piss so many people off and so it doesn't stress me out so much, is to become an apathetic atheist. But I'm not there yet.
There is no God. Then why are we whispering?
Stand by to receive our transmission. Logic clearly dictates.
If you're an atheist, scream atheist!
But what is an atheist?
An atheist is someone who doesn't quite believe that there is somebody out there, some God out there.
Well, then to me, you're an idiot.
From beautiful downtown in Philadelphia, in the state of apostasy, it's the Atheist Underground.
They've had a couple of scandals.
Arriving in Secularia, thank you for riding the Underground. This is Secularia.
That's right, we are in Secularia this week. That is indeed a fictional place because there is no secular area. All of our stops are fictional, if you haven't gathered yet. But Secularia, in fact, sadly, is fictional everywhere. Here in the first great secular nation, the United States of America, where we have no secular voice. There is no secular component, seemingly, to government. There is no secular voting demographic. There is, but it hasn't yet made the splash that it will soon. And there is no secular effort in policymaking. All we get is pandering to religious people. It is the irreverent Rob with you again, and with me again is balloon animal Jason. What's going on, man?
It's a hot one today.
It really is. We go from winter to summer, don't we?
Yeah, it's melting all the balloons. It's annoying.
What do you do about that?
Just stand in the shade mostly.
Do they melt together in like a big glob of color, or do they?
No, they don't usually. They just pop a lot when it's hot.
Do they just lose their shape? No matter what you tie it into, it melts into a blob.
Yeah, eventually, it all turns into basically a worm at some point.
Take a picture, kid. What do you think about that? Does it strike you with the same irony that this is the world's first great secular nation, and we're just the least secular nation?
It does, especially when I think about like scientific advancement and like universities and things like that, where though you think about the politicians' advisors or all of these scientists who, for the most part, don't believe or even care about religious stuff, and they have to kind of advise these guys who are pretending to be. Some of them, I'm sure, are religious, but at least pretending to be religious. So I kind of find that interesting, where mostly for advancement in general of technology, a lot of the people who complain about religion or even politics on social media, it's like, well, the founders of Twitter, I don't know if all of them are atheists, but I know at least a couple of them are openly atheists, and it's like, I don't know what Zuckerberg's deal is, but I don't know. He was atheist at one point. Now he's not. But I have a feeling it was more of a backlash.
Yeah, because his grandma didn't want to, accept the fact. He's like most modern Jews. I'm sure he's
family,
basically an atheist.
Yeah,
and culturally identifies Jewish still. I think that's what we find with our modern educated Jewish friends for the most part.
Mm-hmm.
The whole God in government, is a recent addition. This is what kills me. It's become increasingly obvious that there's a conspiracy on the part of the people who educate our children in this country to keep them in that cycle of ignorance and let them assume that this is a Christian nation, which of course it never was, and I was never taught that myself. I don't know about you, you're a little younger than me, but the tacit approval of "In God We Trust" is a lost fight, and I think we just kind of accept it even as atheists. We kind of fight the other things, but we sort of put up with the "In God We Trust," and one of our guests today, Sally Hunt, is not putting up with that. She's attempting to change the law, and in fact drag this back to secularity as a country. Did it ever dawn on you that that might happen, and why does it take a half a century to wake up and realize that was added by the anti-communists basically in the 50s?
Yeah, it does. I mean, I'm trying to think of it. As a kid, we weren't really taught that it was based off of that I remember. But we didn't really think about it a lot. And so I think even like the "In God We Trust" on the dollar bill, it's like, I think for 90%, this is a number I'm making up, let's say 90% of America, they're just like, we don't really care. But I do think those fights are important because, if you go to Europe, they're like, you guys fight over this? This doesn't make any sense. And I think those are the things that are really holding us back, is that we have so many issues going on, but those are ones that are interface every day, that if we can get those gone, I think a lot of other stuff will clear up, like people saying, we should have the 10 Commandments in the courtroom or in the schools or wherever they want to throw that. I think those types of things, pulling those down, will help. So it feels like a small victory, but I think those are actually the ones that, because they're in our face every day, we sort of get used to them, but those are really the ones that are going to make a huge difference if we can pull it off.
I think you're right, and what she's doing is so important because of that I was stunned to realize that I hadn't put my finger on it before. I mean, that's where we need to start. We need to go back to E pluribus unum. We need to go back to a secular government. We need to forget about divisive language like "In God We Trust," when all of us don't trust in God. But
is that the original motto? What is?
Yeah, sure. E pluribus unum, out of many one.
So I think
it really, and it sums it up. Like a lot of things, the founders were pretty freaking smart when it comes right down to it. They, that motto is
totally fits.
It totally fits the melting pot that America is and even was then. And it's inclusive. It can be seen to include folks who were excluded previously, if we let that be our motto. And speaking of slaves and Native Americans.
Yeah, and I think the irony being, a lot of the people who would say "In God We Trust," I'm generalizing here, but like they'd be the same ones who hang onto the Confederate flag as like it's historical, so that we can almost use that same argument of like let's go back to the original because it's historically what was, like if you want to hang on to history, let's do it everywhere instead of just where you find it, to fit what you want to do.
Exactly, and it goes back to my original point. Let's teach the kids what I learned about the deism of the founders, about their philosophy, about how they based, the Constitution on the teachings of Cicero, and obscure political strategies that hadn't been tried, that were, basically theories of ancient writings that they were privy to because of their education. And it happened to be that, the few of them that worked on it together had that in common, and so they could form a theoretic government based on what they'd learned in college. They were the educated elite, as I've said many times. They weren't just followers of Jesus trying to carve a land out of the wilderness. And so we need to get back to, the actual facts of what they were about. And what they were about was building a country out of many colonists, some of whom were religious and some of whom were quite capitalist in nature, but creating a country where all those people could feel free to worship and live their lives the way they wanted without feeling like the new government was built around one or the other of them, giving that faction the ability to dominate the others. That's really what the founders had to do with making America. So I wanted to ask you, of course, we do trust in God. I trust in God to do several things. Just none of them have anything to do with running the government. But I do trust in God for several things. So I want to, ask you. I'll start, give you an example of what I mean. I trust in God to remain fictional. There you go. What do you trust in God to do or be?
That's an interesting question. I think going more agnostic, I expect him. I trust in God to do exactly the same thing he does every day, in the sense of, I don't need to, praying, whatever. Like, even if there was a God, none of that obviously works, so it doesn't make any sense. So it's almost where he's, to stay irrelevant, I guess would be a better way.
So consistency. You trust in God to be consistent.
Yeah, so consistently either non-existing or consistent. Like, it's not, me praying to him isn't going to change if he had a plan, what it would be. So consistency, I guess, is a good way to put it.
I trust in God to not interfere with a school shooting.
Yeah.
Need more ammo, my child.
I trust in God to stay. Yeah, I don't know. I guess I trust in God to people to say what? To be many gods that that people make up.
You speak any English?
There'll be more gods.
What the fuck was that?
The Christian God, I don't think, is the last God. Do you think they'll ever make up? I mean, is Scientology the same God?
Yeah, you trust in God to have many personifications.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it.
Yeah. What else we got? Weather Jesus from Stonehenge. Are you a big pagan guy?
I was, yeah. Yeah, I think that's all cool. I think it's more fascinating as historical. It's just interesting historically. And I think metaphorically, you have all these, like celebrating the solstice and things like that. Like, it's like that you're celebrating, the seasons, things like that. Like, that's all beautiful poetry. Yeah, I think way more than hanging a dude on a cross and saying it's a miracle kind of thing.
Well, now, do you think there was a possibility? So people have forwarded the theory that Jesus visited Europe, so we can tie it all together. I think that's the point. We send somebody to Stonehenge because maybe, being some sort of religious site, maybe Jesus will pick it. The weather's nice there. I don't know. So
I feel like if he was the Son of God, he would have probably visited several...
everywhere, right?
Yeah, I would think he'd at least leave the Middle East.
Travel the world once.
Actually, yeah. Did he even leave... Did he even leave Jerusalem?
They don't know what he did. This is the thing, between ages of, 12 and 30, or 8 and 30, whatever it is, he could have been doing anything. I'm thinking, if you could, why not see the world? If you know you're going to die when you're 33.
I'm not sure what a 12-year-old does.
You're going to die ugly. He knows he's going to die ugly because he's God.
Mm-hmm.
And he has to submit because that's the whole bit. You may as well see the world, and why not, I don't know, follow the Roman armies around? Maybe he was a Squire, yeah, thank you. Like a centurion's aide, or I don't know what they had in the Roman.
Yeah.
But he could have carried ammunition, or something like that.
The Romans are going hungry. He's like, I got this.
He was a carpenter, for that's how he was a carpenter. So maybe he made arrow shafts, spears.
Do you think he ever built a cross?
I think probably we know he had to carry his own cross, so they probably had to build it too. I mean, why not?
Yeah. He's a carpenter why not?
Add insult to injury. The Romans were good at that.
Yeah.
Build your own cross. Wait, chop your own trees down. Build your own cross. Carry the fucker. Dig the hole. Set it up.
Yeah.
Pour the cement. Wait for the cement to dry in the post hole because you don't want it tipping over.
God's a handy guy, I guess.
You got to be handy when you're a carpenter in an area of the world that has no trees. In the desert, you have to be handy. So we know that. We know Jesus.
Yeah.
If old Jesus was a carpenter, he was mighty handy. And what else we got then? Weather Jesus, Sally Hunt.
Sounds good.
The news.
Yeah, everyone should check out the YouTube channel and the Patreon page. Maybe hit us up on Twitter.
Grandpa was a carpenter, built houses, stores, and banks.
Look for Sally Hunt's work. It's important. So we're gonna let you listen to what she has to say here in a moment and enjoy your moments in Secularia, because after this, it's back to the theocracy that is your sad, sad life in America.
The Atheist Underground is a public service of the Intellectual Transit Authority, moving your mind to places it was too weak to go by itself.
Now here's Stormy Joe with a Weather Jesus update from Stonehenge.
That's right, Rob. I'm here in Wiltshire in the south of England at the world-famous landmark to find out whether Jesus has returned. The Neolithic stone circle is just below me here, where a fake druid appears to be bilking tourists out of hard-earned money.
Anal natrach, uthas bethud,
Hey, lady.
diende.
Hey, lady. Hey, lady.
Oh, great. Here comes some now.
We're from Chicago. Can you take a picture of us in front of the Stonehenge?
It's Stonehenge, Connie. I keep telling you.
Well, that's just silly, Carl. What's a henge? No, Carl, it's like a hedge made of stones. See, it's famous.
Oh my God.
Anal natrach.
Oh, listen, he's doing his magic spell.
Now, Connie, you know there ain't no such thing as magic.
I know, Carl. Besides, I brought my rosary to protect us.
You know that's just a movie line, right?
Oi!
What?
His chant.
What did she say?
It's the charm of making from Excalibur, the King Arthur film from '81.
Oi, piss off. Oh, I remember that movie. Can you make Helen Mirren come back from '81?
Oh, yeah, well, I can bloody well have a go, right? Anal natrach.
It's not real. It's a movie line. A screenwriter wrote it.
Oi, shut your north and south. Do you mind? Trying to make a few bob here.
And what happened to your accent?
As many gods employ my humble tool, my vocal patterns remain fluid. I'm a fluid druid.
I could use some fluid right about now.
Yeah, I'm ready for one of those warm brewskis myself, my friend.
A pilgrim seeks, a pilgrim seeks.
Oh, can it? Cockney con man. I'm here to find out whether Jesus has been seen at Stonehenge.
Ha! Not likely.
Did she say Jesus?
I mean, not recently, mind you, but he has in fact visited here in the past.
Did you hear that, Carol?
Yeah.
Oy vey.
Is that true?
But of course.
I play some you sods.
Before his ministry in the Holy Land, Jesus traveled in Europe extensively, staying in youth hostels and working in pubs, until he founded the first Christian church in our fair England, right down the Frog and Toad in Glastonbury. From there, he travelled back and forth to this holy site in a meditative quest for knowledge and illumination. This continued for some time until one day, in the dead of night, he hitchhiked to Edinburgh, with a pack of werewolves from the moors to the west. In Edinburgh, don't you know, he developed a fondness, as most men will, for single malt whiskey.
Pass the whiskey. Cheers, man!
And flaming hot red-headed Scottish lassies.
Ooh, that's a nice robe, Jesus.
Until he had to be removed by his wealthy uncle under heavy restraint.
Jesus Christ, that's enough!
And shipped back to Palestine on a merchant vessel laden with cod liver oil.
Who's the drunken hippie?
Jewish Messiah, I reckon. Whatever the fuck that is.
Long story short, he tried to fuck out, began his ministry, and you can pick up the rest right there in Matthew, Martin, Luther, and John, Paul, George, and Ringo, whichever one you bloody like.
That's the stupidest thing I ever heard.
No, it's true, and to prove it, one of the werewolves, the one called Ned, I want to say, saved Jesus' whiskey drinking cup, knowing it would be worth something, right? And he eyes it, see? And he gets words of Camelot, and he gives it a little spin, you know? A bit of the old razzle-dazzle, right? And bang! There you go. The quest for the Holy Grail. Now, what could be more real than that?
It's true, Carol.
Oh my god, I'm talking about recently. A second coming, the rapture, Armageddon, Judgment Day. Any sign of Jesus' return at all?
Yeah, no, not a peep, really.
There you have it, Rob. No sign of Jesus here. And the weather, well, the weather is gray and mildewy. This has been AU Stormy Joe reporting from Stonehenge.
It's Stonehenge, dear.
Shut up.
I think I saw a bear on the way in.
Lead the way, Belushi.
Hey, it's Sunday. You think they'll have the bears?
No.
Oh, give it a fucking rest, for Christ's sake.
What is this God that some people talk about? Like, what does that even mean?
We are with Sally Buxbaum Hunt.
You can also just call me Sally Hunt.
She's
right.
just Sally B. Hunt. It's cool. You ought to be Sally B. Hunt. Tell us how you got started fighting in God We Trust.
I have always been an atheist my whole life. I was fortunate enough to be raised not being indoctrinated into any religion. So I've always noticed the discrimination, the judgment, the prejudice, the negativity from people when I admit that I'm an atheist. I have always been passionate about the separation of church and state. Government is supposed to serve and represent all people regardless of religious beliefs or non-belief. We should never be promoting that some people are superior to others, that some people are inferior simply because they don't believe in a God. And that is definitely what is being promoted by our government every single day. First, I did a lot of activism for sex education in public schools. There was a fundamentalist Christian organization here in the St. Louis area called Thrive that was in a lot of public schools teaching abstinence only, fake sex ed propaganda. We managed to get them out of 16 public school districts. They are unfortunately still in 4. But because of that, and people started knowing, that I am not afraid to publicly state that I'm an atheist and to publicly do activism for the separation of church and state, a friend of mine who lives in Wentzville, Missouri, sent me a picture of the new City Hall in Wentzville, which has a very large display in the center of the dais of the City Hall, "In God We Trust." It was a Wentzville resident who is an atheist who knows that this display is wrong, but he was very afraid to speak out publicly himself. Wentzville is a very conservative, white, Christian fundamentalist area, and he didn't want to deal with the discrimination and backlash. But he knew that I was perfectly happy to speak out, and so I did so. I attended a Wentzville Board of Aldermen meeting, and they knew who I was before I spoke. I stated that I wanted to speak, so they knew that I did not live in Wentzville. They knew that I was going to speak in opposition to this In God We Trust display, and they allowed me to speak, and it was no issue because they do allow non-residents to speak. I spoke. I was polite. I was respectful. What happened was the mayor cut me off early. Everyone is supposed to get 5 minutes to speak. He cut me off at 4 minutes and 35 seconds, and he lied, and he said, your 5 minutes is up. And then he accused me of lying. He responded to me because I had said, that there are Wentzville residents that I had spoken to who are opposed to this display, but who are afraid to come forward for fear of hostility and resentment and discrimination and all of that. And I mentioned the one guy that I spoke to, but there were others. I spoke to a couple other Wentzville residents with who felt the same way and were afraid to speak publicly. But anyway, so the mayor accused me of lying. Basically, he said, well, let it be known that, you mentioned that there are Wentzville residents who are opposed to this display, but that's just hearsay, he said, because they're not here tonight. And Wentzville residents never have an issue making their voices heard when they're opposed to something. Nope, that's just hearsay. They would be here if they were really opposed to this display. And then I responded again, but I explained to you why they're not here. And then he said, okay, well, I'm going to have you taken out of this meeting. And I went to go sit back down. I did sit back down, and he had 2 police officers come and escort me, grab my arm, pull me out of this meeting. And the ACLU contacted me after they heard about this. It was on the news and everything. The ACLU has now filed a lawsuit against the city of Wentzville on my behalf.
People don't mention the ACLU, and they were probably doing it before anybody else was, and they're still doing it today. So
the ACLU's lawsuit that they filed for me, technically it wasn't about, being an atheist or
Sure.
It was just about my free speech rights being violated, but it was clearly because of my viewpoint that happened, because I spoke about, that I am an atheist and I spoke against the In God We Trust.
The other thing that strikes me, and I ran up against this myself, is when you try to represent others as a leader in that sector, you get dismissed. Now, if you were a pastor who represented the concerns of his flock, they'd have given you all due respect and probably overtime.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Unless you were a snake handler or a Muslim. And I wonder how they'd feel if the Adhan was played over the loudspeakers in their town, like they put in God We Trust. What if they played the Muslim call to prayer for those Muslim families in that town?
Right. The display In God We Trust is about Christianity. These legislators are always Christian in some denomination. They believe in Jesus. To me, it doesn't matter which denomination, but it's Christianity that's in our laws. It's Christianity that is promoted by our government.
Lay it down, Sally. No need to leave so soon. I've been trying all night long just to talk to you.
In God We Trust is the national motto, whether we like it or not. Is that problematic? The fact that, how do you really get that removed when the fact is that they adopted that in the 50s and we should try to get it removed to go back? How does that affect it?
This is my argument here, is that just because something is legal doesn't make it right, doesn't make it ethical, and really does not make it constitutional. And we just need to continue saying that. This is absolutely unconstitutional. This is absolutely a promotion, endorsement, and advancement of religion by the government. If we just don't say anything and we just sit back and accept that this is our motto, and of course this display will go up because it's our national motto and it's legal, and then we just say absolutely nothing, and we don't remind people that atheists exist, non-Christians exist. We are not ashamed. We are not apologetic. We just happen to not agree with their beliefs in a God for which there is no evidence, but just the point that we are here and we are standing up for ourselves, that we are excluded from this statement, In God We Trust. The statement is divisive. It is exclusionary. It is discriminatory. And so every single day we have our government telling us that there's something wrong with us if we are non-theists, atheists, if we are non-Christians, really, this is absolutely unacceptable because we are not inferior. We are not less worthy of rights and protection and representation from our government. It's our government too. My argument about this is because people a lot of time they like to talk about, oh, well, the majority of people believe in God and the majority are Christians or whatever, but that's tyranny of the majority. And just because it's the majority believes in a God, that's not relevant. Government doesn't get to promote that, believing in a God is superior to not believing. And really, in God we trust may as well say atheists are not welcome here. And it's discriminatory. It promotes discrimination. It promotes oppression, persecution. The woman who spoke after me got extra time after she talked in support of the display and against me. As she got up there and she spoke negatively about me, and then she spoke in support of their display of In God We Trust. And she did that for approximately 2 minutes or so. And then after that, the mayor gave her her full time, her full 5 minutes to speak after she had already talked about that. And so clearly, it just proves my entire point that this display, this motto, promotes that the government has favoritism for one set of religious beliefs over another, and is promoting preferential treatment for those people and discrimination against, atheists, against people who don't believe in a God, against non-Christians.
You are not fighting this because they're breaking the law. You're fighting to change the law. You're doing what the grassroots movement needs to do, not talk about the differences between us as atheists. We need to move forward on a civic issue that religious people should care about too. That's what they don't get. This is for their protection too. But the Christians lose sight of the fact that as soon as they allow the government to sanction one form of Christianity, it opens the door to them turning the key on your version of Christianity, because separation of church and state is for the good of both. And churches are stronger and the state is stronger.
Goddamn right.
What's next in the hunt for Sally?
I actually have been accepted into the counseling PhD program.
Mustang Sally.
Yeah, I plan to go into private practice, focusing on sex education. And then I was thinking that it would also be really cool as a counselor to specialize in helping people recovering from religion.
Paging Dr. Hunt.
Yeah.
I
look one day.
I feel so shitty about myself now.
Oh, no.
I don't even put pants on for these podcasts. I'm trying to get the word out. People are getting their PhDs and leading revolutions. So no speaking tour. Do you plan to take this further as far as?
I have been invited to various groups to speak, and I recently went and spoke at SEMO University in Cape Girardeau, Missouri, over here at the Secular Student Alliance, and I spoke to them. I mean, yeah, if people, invite me, I'm happy to speak, and I love just helping to get the message out there and helping to inspire other atheists to speak up, as well as people who are not atheists, who believe in the separation of church and state and who see that it is what's right and it's about justice and equality. And I mean, yeah, the more people that are willing to speak up, the better. So anything I can do for that, like you mentioned how I was on Fox News and they invited me on, and I got there were a couple of people that criticized me for going on that horrible, propaganda network. But at the same time, this message needs to get out there as much as possible. I'll talk about this anywhere.
Any publicity is good publicity, right?
Yeah.
And we have to be willing to take it just to get like you said, just to keep us in front of the public. When I was young, if you'd have told me that it would be cooler to be gay in 2017 than it would be to be openly secular, I'd have called you crazy. I mean, it's so fantastic what the LGBT movement's been able to do for themselves, but it's remarkable that it's more acceptable to be anything, literally anything, in America other than an atheist.
people have their full rights to go to any church or house of worship and to read any religious text, any holy book that they want, and they have their full freedoms and their full rights. We can't pretend as though there's evidence for these beliefs. And that's when I start to, when I will confront and challenge someone is when they claim that this is definitely true and that there's evidence. I mean, there's just not, and that's not mean to say. It's just a fact. There's zero evidence.
Just the facts, ma'am.
Now, are you a city girl your whole life, or did you move into St. Louis from outside?
I've lived here my whole life.
Is that easier, do you think, than somebody in tiny town Missouri?
Oh, I mean, definitely. I've heard some horrible stories, and I have experienced it as well. I used to work as a counselor in Troy, Missouri, and that's more rural, small town kind of mentality, predominantly white, predominantly Christian, and conservative, Republican, and so much Christian supremacy. So much, just the assumption that everyone is Christian, absolutely entitlement, so much Christian privilege. I mean, they just assume everybody's Christian, and they just openly talk about, and this was in a public school that I worked in, they would openly talk about, how they go to church. They openly talk about praying, openly talk about how the problem with kids when, is when they have issues is that they don't go to church and that they're not Christian. And just this, open prejudice and hostility against anyone who's not Christian.
We have the most religious industrialized nation by far, and we have the most school shootings. How does more Jesus help?
Right.
How does more Jesus help that problem?
Oh, yeah. There's a list of the ranking of like the happiest countries, and based on a lot of surveys, and like the top 4 happiest nations rank also in like the least religious. It's like, Denmark, Finland.
It's pretty obvious. It's really pretty obvious. Yeah, Sweden, Norway, Denmark, Holland, all of the Belgium. They're all ecstatic.
It's like not only are they happiest, but they are healthiest.
Yes,
and
quality
they are
of life,
safest, as you said.
Longest lived.
Like the crime is not not a problem. Yep. Exactly. Like they are doing so much better than the U.S.
Oh, have mercy.
What is your observation of the movement in general? We have this problem with sexual assault charges against leaders in the atheist movement. Do you pay any attention?
The atheist movement. Okay, we need to focus on the separation of church and state and like actually making that happen. We need to focus on the groundwork, going to meetings, speaking up. I feel like it needs to be like action oriented, inspiring people to speak up and to get the job done. But so aside from that, we in the atheist movement need to lift up voices of women and people of color. I think that it has been a predominantly white male movement. I have seen a lot of misogyny. I have seen a lot of racism and xenophobia. The thing is, being an atheist, just being atheist doesn't mean that we all share the same political views or views about anything other than we just don't accept the claim that a God exists. So it doesn't mean that we're always going to agree on everything else. It's interesting because the atheists that I have met who have right-wing views about some things and have misogynistic and racist views and don't actually care about fighting for social, economic, and racial justice, and they don't care about actually fighting for equality for all under the law, those people are really enablers and apologists for Christian theocracy and Christian supremacy. You can't support right-wing politicians and policies without, you have to admit that when you do that, you are supporting the people who are promoting Christian theocracy right now. Like it's the Republicans, it's the right wing. There's no way around that. Plus, what they do is they hurt the movement. The people with the misogynists, the rape apologists, the anti-feminists, the people who promote racism, who speak out against the oppressed, marginalized people, women and people of color, who are simply advocating for their rights, like people who are scared of those conversations, they are hurting the entire movement, because those conversations are necessary and they're 100% in line with what we as atheists are doing, because we atheists who fight against Christian supremacy and Christian theocracy, which is oppression against us as atheists, it's the same idea as we fight against white supremacy and, racism and harm against minorities, people of color, and same thing against patriarchy and what women deal with. I mean, it's all the same idea. Like, there are these overarching systemic problems, and we can't pretend as though we only care about one and we don't care about others. I'm just kind of fed up with people who are uncomfortable with these conversations. I mean, if you are, then you're hurting the entire movement.
You're part of the problem.
Ultimately,
Yeah.
You're exactly part of the problem.
Well, no thought sanity, be a speech guide, everything that Uncle John need, oh baby, yes, baby, woo, baby, having me some fun tonight, yeah.
Sally Hunt is where it's at, people. Check us out. Do you have a website, a Facebook page you want to plug?
I call myself the Passionate Atheist. So facebook.com/Passionate Atheist. You can find me there. I'm happy to connect with people on my personal Facebook page as well. Maybe send me a message. But Sally Buxbaum Hunt, Buxbaum Hunt. And you can find me there. My YouTube channel is youtube.com/Sally Hunt Atheist. And just my name, Sally Hunt, is my YouTube channel as well. And I'm, Twitter, Sally B Hunt, and Instagram.
You do have
Sally
a Twitter.
B. Hunt
I was going to
too,
ask.
so.
I couldn't find you.
Yeah.
I'll find you on Twitter. Great stuff. Take
Thank
it easy.
you.
Yep.
No thought sanity, be a speech guide, everything that Uncle John need, oh baby, yes, baby, woo, baby, having me some fun tonight, yeah. Well, I saw Uncle John with bald-head Sally. He saw Mary coming and he jumped back in the alley, oh baby, yes, baby.
Atheist Underground is sponsored in part by Smartass Atheist Guild. Look for them on Facebook.
Do you mind the gap?
Here now with secular news and events is Jojo Vandescoop.
The Mississippi governor recently announced that all license plate distributed to residents will include the state seal, which includes the phrase "In God We Trust." Residents who wish to obtain a license plate with a different background will have to pay a fee. The legal director of the American Humanist Association sent a letter to the governor addressing the constitutional concerns over separation of church and state, but it is unclear whether the American Humanist Association will file any lawsuits. The license plate distribution with a state seal is set to begin in January 2019. 4 Democratic members of the U.S. House of Representatives have recently formed a Congressional Freethought Caucus. The representatives are Jared Huffman and Jerry McNerney from California, Jamie Raskin from Maryland, and Dan Kildee from Michigan. There are 4 main goals. 1. To promote public policy formed on the basis of reason, science, and moral values. 2. To protect the secular character of our government by adhering to the strict constitutional principle of the separation of church and state. 3. To oppose discrimination against atheists, agnostics, humanists, seekers, religious and non-religious persons, and to champion the value of freedom of thought and conscience worldwide. And 4. To provide a forum for members of Congress to discuss their moral frameworks, ethical values, and personal religious journeys. In Egypt, an atheist blogger, Sharif Gabir, was recently arrested while he was at the Cairo airport waiting to take a flight to Malaysia. Gabur was previously detained in 2013 for allegedly promoting atheism, which can be punished in Egypt under a law that bans insults to religions. Gabur posted to social media that he believed he would be arrested due to a complaint he believes that Muslim lawyers filed with the Attorney General's office. The International and Humanist Ethical Union, a London-based organization, has called for the blogger's immediate release. In conference news, the Northeast Conference on Science and Skepticism will be holding their annual conference in New York City from July 12th through the 15th. The conference is a collaboration among 4 groups: New York City Skeptics, the New England Skeptical Society, the Skeptic's Guide to the Universe, and the Society for Science-Based Medicine. Speakers include Ginny Hughes, BuzzFeed's science editor, Heather Berlin, a cognitive neuroscientist, and special guest James Randi. More information about the conference and how to register can be found at the organization's website, necss.org.
All right, get your asses back on the train. That's all for Secularia. Back to your mundane lives. We will see you in Freethinker Falls. Freethinker Falls up next. Yes, a Tony suburb full of nice-looking, well-kept suburban ladies and pseudo-intellectual fools.
Thank you for riding the Underground. Next stop, Freethinker Falls. Freethinker Falls is next.